I warned everybody that I was going to be remineralizing our soil this year. This is our no-till garden area. For those of you that watch me grind the ground up with the tractor, most of our food production is no-till. This is our grocery row gardens, and right now we are getting ready for the spring. And this mix I'm using was created by Steve Solomon. And today I'm going to show you how to make it and tell you why you should. Multiple years ago, I read Steve Solomon's book, The Intelligent Gardener. And I thought, this is brilliant. The idea of mineralizing your vegetables, mineralizing your crops. So you're taking in the minerals, the highest quality minerals possible. And I never really thought about the fact that I might have crops that look pretty good, but the mineral content of them might not be that high. I just thought, if I take care of them and I give them some manure and maybe they get some ashes and some compost, they ought to be fine. But then Steve opened this whole new world for me in The Intelligent Gardener. The problem is that I'm not really good at doing the calculations and figuring out exactly how to get a mix. So I took some soil tests at our previous property, which had extremely bad soil, and I had Steve take a look at them. And he came up with a mineralization solution for our acid, sandy, very low organic matter soil, and we gave it a try. And what we found was the area where we put the Steve's mix had the best tasting vegetables. They were bigger, they were juicier, they were sweeter, they had more subtle flavors in them that I'd never tasted before. We had radishes that tasted so good. I wanted to just keep eating radishes. And I've never craved radishes in my entire life. But they were so good that I kept saying, oh man, I'm gonna have another slice of those radishes. Great big daikons that we sliced up, and they were just fantastic. And we compared them to ones that were fed with compost and 10-10-10 and various other amendments. And the ones that had the Steve's mix had some of the best flavors of anything that we grew. So this year we are going back to the mineralization, and I am mixing up a batch of what I call Steve's mix. He's had different names for it over the years. Complete Organic Fertilizer was one of the names for it in one of his earlier books. But I have right here a cement mixture that was left with our house out in one of the outbuildings. And the previous owner said, we've got a cement mixer here. Do you want us to just sell it or take it, or would you ever use it? And I said, oh yes. And I had it in mind for the last 2 years that I was going to use this to mix up Steve's mix. And then my wife laminated and printed out the recipe here for Steve's mix. This is where you're going to have to just freeze this frame and save it, guys. Right there. That's the recipe that we have right now. And that's up here on the wall. And then I have all the amendments, which are actually kind of hard to get, down here on the ground. So cottonseed meal, dolomitic lime, regular garden lime. This is kelp meal, gypsum. This is a little bit of phosphorus. This is just diammonium phosphate. Steve recommends using soft rock phosphate, but we couldn't find it, so we need a little phosphorus, so that's what that is. This is potassium sulfate, manganese sulfate, borax, 20 mule team for boron. This is zinc sulfate. This is copper sulfate. And this is sodium molybdate. So that is pretty much all the minerals that a plant could ever want, plus anything that it might be missing. The kelp meal is kind of your catch-all because it has all the ocean minerals in it. So now we're going to mix up a batch and we're going to use it. I'm going to make a triple batch, so I'm going to put in 12 quarts of cottonseed meal. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And then I'm going to take 3 quarts of this dolomitic crushed lime. And then we're going to put in a half a quart of long lime, so that is 1.5 when we triple it. You don't have to be super neurotic about getting it perfect. You're not going to burn your plants or anything, except with some of the, maybe the micronutrients if you got a little loose on it. Half a quart of kelp meal, so that is 1.5 quarts. I like to go a little generous on the kelp. This is 2 cups of pelletized gypsum, so 1.5 quarts. And then we need to put in 1 cup of phosphorus, which is 3 cups. 2/3 of a cup of potassium sulfate. So now we're getting a little fancy here. So 2/3 times 3, that is 6/3. Which is pretty easy. 2 cups. This is just pure potassium sulfate right here. Then we have 2 tablespoons, so 6 tablespoons of manganese sulfate. When's the last time you've thought about putting manganese in your garden? I never thought about it before Steve Solomon got into my head and messed with it. .5 tablespoons borax. So that is 4.5 tablespoons. Borax is your good source of boron. But you don't want too much boron because it's strong. You can burn your plants, but particularly your brassicas appreciate it. They get hollow stems on your broccoli, you probably have a boron deficiency. Let's see, 2 teaspoons zinc sulfate, so that's 6 teaspoons, which should be 2 tablespoons if I remember correctly. And then copper sulfate. Now copper sulfate's another one. This will burn your plants, this will kill fungi, etc., but your plants do need copper. So it's good to have a little bit. You just don't want a lot of it. A lot of it's just like a lot of things. You get a lot of it, you're going to be in trouble. Too much of a good thing is not a good thing. Our last one is the sodium molybdate. On a standard batch, it's just 1/8 of a teaspoon. That's like molybdenum. It's just a tiny amount. Just a tiny little sprinkle. Plants don't need very much, but a little bit will do it. Now's the fun part. We just power this sucker up. This is going to get really dusty, so I'll let you see it for a second, and then I'm going to cover it up because it'll throw dust out of this thing. Tip it back and forth a little bit. let it mix from the bottom to the top, but I don't want to breathe all of that dust. And just put a lid over it. Give it about 30 seconds, and then we dump it out into the trash can. The trash can is where we keep it. See how much dust is coming out of there? Whoa, it looks like we made science. You can pretty much throw this around your gardens without burning anything, and it lasts for a good bit of the season. There's probably some precise application rate, but I pretty much just do this and zip it along the ground in a generous handful. I just put in some crops in these rows right here, some turnips and some daikons and some broccoli, and this will give them a start, and if they look like they need more later in the season, you can just throw more alongside them. We always lose a little bit of the lime to the air, but I don't really care. It's going somewhere in my yard where it'll lime something, so no biggie. If you are interested in learning more, you got to check out Steve's book, The Intelligent Gardener. And of course, I will also post a link to the recipe that we have. However, it is not going to be exactly right necessarily for your garden. If your garden is, you know, maybe high pH already, you might not want all the lime. If you have too much copper in your soil, you might want to avoid the copper, you know, whatever. You're going to have to do a soil test and figure it out. But the Intelligent Gardener will help you with that. And this just gives you a base to start with. Now, following this, like we're doing this year on some of our gardens, really is kind of a pain in the neck. It will give you all kinds of ideas to read The Intelligent Gardener, and then you start going, oh man, do I really want to mix this and buy this and do that? And I you know, it's just up to you. I'm not going to say that there's just one best way to garden. I find that because the produce was so tasty, because we have the resources right now to just go ahead and buy all these amendments and do it, and because we eat almost completely from our own backyard, the idea of having the very nutrient-dense food is important to us, and we can afford it right now. So we're doing that with our vegetables, our smaller vegetable plots. We can't afford to do everything like mineralize all of our potatoes and the food forest and the pastures and everything. It's just, there's just no way. But we spent probably about $200 on amendments, which should do all of this garden area, which is pretty good. And if the flavor of the radishes that I had before was any indicator, it's totally worth it. Particularly just, I mean, we really do grow most all of our vegetables back here, so we're just going to go ahead and do that. But if you wanted to mineralize and you didn't want to go take a soil test and you didn't want to follow all of the little micronutrient suggestions and everything in here, and you wanted to just kind of wing it and not spend that much money, you could just lime your gardens if they need it. That gives you some calcium, and put some compost on there, which gives you a mix of various things from your yard. But again, it might be a little short in some mineral if your soil is short on selenium or something like that, and you know, just compost everything from your own land, you might not add any more selenium. So if you're just worried about filling in those gaps, you can always just go get a sack of kelp meal. If you go to your local feed and seed store, they can often order you a sack of kelp meal. If you buy it on Amazon or online, the shipping cost is kind of expensive. So you should be able to get a bag of kelp meal for something like 50 to 60 bucks. And you could spread that over all of your gardens and get those 90 minerals of the ocean and kind of just redneck your way into it. Or if you're even more fortunate and you were in a place where you could gather seaweed and throw it in your garden beds, you could get those ocean minerals as well. I highly recommend getting a copy of The Intelligent Gardener, whether you go ahead and follow all of its advice or not, because the minerals in your food are very important to your own health. So whether you do this or not, it's definitely worth reading the book. I'll put a link to that below and to the sources of where we got our amendments to do this kind of nerdy experiment. And we'll update you as we go along on how it turns out and how the food tastes. If you're also interested in learning how to grow 500 pounds of food for the first time in your garden, join the Grow 500 Challenge. I will put a link to that below. We are giving away prizes. We've got an active community, and we are trying to get at least 10 to 20 people to grow 500 pounds of food in their backyard garden by August. So you can come and join that challenge, and I'll put a link to that below. Thanks for joining me. Until next time, may your thumbs always be green.